They say a house is never truly silent. There's always a creak in the floorboards, a whisper of wind against the windows, a faint sound you can't quite place. But what if the sound isn't random? What if, every time you're alone, you hear it? 3 slow, deliberate knocks, coming from somewhere inside your home. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your mind playing tricks. Until the night you realize you're not really alone. Tonight's story isn't just about the knocks. It's about what waits behind them. A presence patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, and a woman forced to question reality as she sits in bed, wide awake, while her husband sleeps peacefully beside her. Or does he? This is the chilling story of the knocking only happens when I'm alone. But I'm not alone. It began like most nights, with a restless silence. The kind of silence so deep it made your ears ring, like the house itself was holding its breath. She lay on her side, staring at the faint glow of her phone on the nightstand, watching as the screen dimmed and went black. The digital clock blinked. 2:04 a.m. She could hear her husband's steady breathing beside her, soft and rhythmic. She envied how easily he slipped into sleep, while her mind turned over and over like restless hands wringing themselves in the dark. Every creak of the old pipes seemed louder at this hour. Every rustle of the curtains stirred her unease. And then, as if on cue, it came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. They weren't loud, they weren't urgent, but they were there. Her heart stopped. She turned her head toward the sound, frozen in the dark. It was impossible to tell where it came from. The hallway, the front door, or maybe from the walls themselves. She waited, straining her ears, but the house had gone still again. She reached out, shaking her husband's shoulder gently. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. No response. She shook him harder. Nothing. His breathing remained steady, deep and oblivious. She pulled the blanket closer, convincing herself it had been her imagination. But she kept her eyes on the bedroom door, unable to shake the feeling that someone was on the other side. The next night, she couldn't pretend. She stayed awake, muscles stiff, eyes darting to the corners of the dark room. Midnight passed, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Her husband's breathing filled the room again, a calm counterpoint to the wild hammering of her own heart. She scrolled mindlessly on her phone to keep her mind busy, watching silent videos and half-reading headlines. But her focus shattered when it came again. Her phone slipped from her hands onto the mattress with a dull thud. This time, it sounded closer, more intentional. Her throat tightened. "You heard that right," she whispered, pressing her palm against her husband's arm. Nothing, not even a stir. The fear turned sharp in her chest. It felt like a game, like something out there was testing her, measuring her reactions. She didn't want to move, didn't want to breathe. The knocks returned, steady and unhurried. Knock, knock, knock. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. But the thin beam of light only deepened the shadows in the corners of the room. She wanted to scream, but some primal part of her warned her not to make a sound. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "It's just the house," she whispered to herself. But she didn't believe it. On the 3rd night, the air felt different, heavy, oppressive, as though the house itself was holding something unseen within its walls. She pulled the covers tighter, pressing her back against her husband's sleeping form. 1:58 a.m. Her pulse drummed in her ears. She had decided to ignore it this time, to not give in to the fear, but her resolve cracked when the knocks came again. Louder now. Knock, knock, knock. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just a sound. It felt deliberate, like someone or something wanted her attention. She tried shaking her husband again, this time almost sobbing his name into the dark. Nothing, not even a groan. She listened for his breathing. It was there, steady and slow, but somehow it didn't comfort her. It didn't sound right anymore. She pressed her hands over her ears, willing herself to block out the sound. But the knocks didn't stop. They kept coming, calm and patient. Knock, knock, knock. She curled into herself, fighting the urge to cry out. Whatever it wasn't going to leave. By the fourth night, she was hollow-eyed and trembling before she even got into bed. The anxiety clawed at her ribs, leaving her feeling lightheaded, almost sick. She had left the hallway light on this time. A thin band of yellow shone beneath the door, a pathetic defense against the darkness pressing in from every corner. She glanced at her husband. His face was peaceful, eyes shut, mouth slightly parted in sleep. She wanted so badly to shake him awake, to demand he stay up with her, but she knew it wouldn't work. It never did. The clock read 3:06 a.m. when the first knock came. This time, it wasn't at the door. It was on the wall, just behind her headboard. Knock, knock, knock. She jerked upright, clutching the sheets. She pressed her hand against the wall. It was cold, lifeless, but she could feel it, a faint vibration. Something was there. She pulled her knees to her chest, staring at the door. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Please, stop." The knocks grew louder, faster. Knock, knock, knock. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the sound circled the room. Walls, floorboards, ceiling. It was everywhere. She didn't sleep at all that night. When the sun finally crept through the blinds, she felt like a ghost herself. The house seemed normal again, but her nerves were shredded. She avoided the bedroom all day, wandering from room to room, unable to settle. She thought about calling someone, her sister, a friend, but what would she say? "There's knocking in my house." They'd laugh, or worse, they'd pity her. By evening, her resolve was gone. She stood in the kitchen staring at her husband's favorite mug, trying to remember the sound of his laugh, his voice. Why couldn't she remember? The memory seemed blurred, like an old photograph smudged by too many fingers. She snapped her head up when she heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it came from the living room. It wasn't even dark yet. She felt cold all over as she whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. Then one last knock, louder, closer. That night, she didn't even bother getting into bed. She sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the door. Her husband lay behind her, unmoving, but she didn't look at him, couldn't. 2:44 a.m. The knocks came again. Knock, knock, knock. She didn't flinch this time. She was done being afraid. "What do you want?" she whispered into the stillness. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of her own breathing. Then, the door handle turned. Slowly, she watched as it twisted halfway before falling still again. The silence that followed was worse than the knocking. She wanted to move, to run, but her body felt rooted to the spot. The air was thick and suffocating. She whispered again, this time barely audible, "Please." She froze, the sound vibrating faintly beneath her, as though something deep inside the mattress had stirred. Her fingers dug into the sheets, every muscle in her body rigid with terror. It wasn't the phone. She could see it now, lying silent on the nightstand. This was something else, something alive. She dared a glance at her husband, willing him to move, to breathe differently, to give her any sign of life. But his chest rose and fell in the same unnatural rhythm. It didn't seem right anymore, too slow, too even. It didn't match the erratic thundering of her own heartbeat. The vibration deepened, turning into a low rumble, like a growl reverberating from inside the bed itself. She felt it travel through her legs, up her spine, until her teeth began to chatter involuntarily. The knocking returned, but now it wasn't on the door. It came from the headboard, right behind her skull. 3 sharp raps, making the wood tremble. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, her nails clawing into the blanket. The sound moved again, tapping along the bed frame like fingers drumming idly. It circled her, teasing, as if mocking her fear. She shut her eyes, silently praying to wake up, to find herself in daylight, with the memory of a bad dream fading. But the air in the room told her this wasn't a dream. It had changed, grown heavier, thicker, as though she was breathing in something stale and ancient. A faint odor wafted up, metallic, like rust, or was it blood? She covered her mouth with both hands, fighting the sob rising in her throat. The knocking stopped abruptly. Silence followed, so complete it made her ears ring. And then she felt it. A weight pressed down at the edge of the mattress, slow, deliberate. Something was sitting there. Her body screamed at her to look, but terror rooted her in place. She stared straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the shadowed wall, barely blinking. The mattress dipped further. The weight shifted closer, and she swore she could hear the faint creak of springs adjusting beneath her. Whatever it was crawling toward her inch by inch. Her breathing hitched with every movement, each inhale shallow and ragged. Her hands trembled violently as she clutched the sheets tighter, her knuckles aching from the strain. She wanted to reach for her husband again, to find some anchor in this nightmare. But a voice deep in her mind whispered, "Don't touch him, don't even try." Her lips quivered as tears streamed down her cheeks, soaking into the pillow. The bed shifted one last time, and then the pressure stopped. It was right behind her now, close enough that she could almost feel a breath on the back of her neck, warm, damp, and sickly sweet. Then came a sound so quiet, she thought she'd imagined it. A whisper, just one word. "Wake." Her eyes shot open wider, her pulse roaring like a drum. She strained her ears, but there was only silence now. She dared a tiny glance at her husband, still unmoving, still that perfect, even breathing. The whisper had been too real to dismiss. She wanted to bolt from the bed, to run screaming through the house and out into the night, barefoot if she had to. But her legs wouldn't move. She felt paralyzed, not from sleep, but from the raw animal terror coursing through her veins. Her stomach churned violently as the whisper came again, this time right at her ear. "Wake up," she gasped. The sound wasn't coming from the room. It wasn't from behind her. It was inside her head. Her vision blurred as panic clawed at her chest. She shut her eyes tightly and screamed inside her mind, "I'm awake, I'm awake." But the voice only chuckled softly, a sound that dripped with malice. The pressure lifted from the bed suddenly. She felt the mattress spring back, as if the weight had never been there. Her breath came in shallow gasps, as she dared to peek over her shoulder. The space behind her was empty, no shadow, no figure, just her husband, lying there as still as a corpse. The digital clock glowed in the darkness, 3:03 a.m. Then came 3 knocks, this time from inside the closet. The knocks came from inside the closet. 3 deliberate taps, muffled yet sharp enough to slice through the silence. Her entire body stiffened. She couldn't bring herself to look at the closet door. It had been shut when she went to bed. She was certain of it. Now, she wasn't sure. A faint scraping sound followed, like fingernails dragging across wood, slow and methodical. She gripped the sheets tighter, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Every instinct screamed at her to stay still, to not even blink, but her eyes burned from staring too long into the darkness. The air grew thicker, heavier, carrying a damp, almost rotten scent. She swallowed hard, her throat dry as sandpaper. Another knock, this time louder, as if whatever was inside was no longer trying to be gentle. Then, a whisper, not from the bed, not from her head, from the closet. "Let me out." Her stomach lurched violently. Her mind raced for explanations. Maybe she'd left the television on? A prank? Anything but this. But she hadn't watched TV. She hadn't seen another person in days besides her husband, who still hadn't moved, not even slightly. She dared a glance at him. His face looked pale, almost waxen in the dim glow of the clock. Was he even breathing anymore? She reached out, her fingers brushing his skin. Cold, not icy, but colder than it should have been. A sob caught in her throat as she snatched her hand back. She felt utterly alone, except for whatever was in that closet. The knob rattled suddenly, violently. She flinched, slapping a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. The rattling stopped as quickly as it had started. Silence reclaimed the room, heavier now, pressing in on her from all sides. She heard a faint creak, wood bending under weight, and realized with a jolt of horror the closet door was opening. Just an inch, just enough to let out a sliver of darkness blacker than the rest of the room. She watched in paralyzed terror as the gap widened slightly. A cold draft whispered across her face, carrying the faintest sound, breathing. Ragged, wet, too close. She clenched her eyes shut, silently begging for it to go away. Her heart hammered so loudly, she feared it would give her away. Then it spoke again. "Wake up." This time louder, closer. Her eyes shot open. The closet was still cracked open. No movement, no figure, but she felt it watching her. She could feel its gaze like icy fingers brushing against her skin. She forced herself to move, just barely, reaching for her phone again. She tapped the screen, desperate to dial anyone, police, family, anyone, but her hands trembled so violently, she nearly dropped it. The screen flickered, her fingers froze. There was no signal, the bars were gone. Only one word stared back at her, where the carrier name should have been. Awake. She choked back a sob, her vision blurring with fresh tears. The phone vibrated suddenly in her hands, nearly making her scream. A notification appeared, though no one had sent it. "We're here." Her breath caught in her chest. The knocking resumed, frantic now. It pounded against the closet door, against the walls, even the floor beneath the bed. She felt it in her bones, each strike vibrating through the mattress, her ears filled with a cacophony of whispers, overlapping, some laughing, some crying, all speaking in tongues she didn't understand. And then, abrupt silence. The air shifted. She felt weight on the bed again. It was closer this time. She didn't dare move as a hand. Ice cold brushed her hair away from her face. "Good," it whispered, its breath sour against her skin. "You're awake." She couldn't breathe. The words, "you're awake," echoed in her mind. Like a curse, she could not escape. Every syllable seemed to throb in the thick air of the room, pressing down on her chest, until her lungs screamed for air. But even as she gasped silently, her body stayed rigid, frozen under the oppressive weight of something unseen yet undeniably present. The faint scent of decay, metallic and sour, drifted across her face like the foul breath of a long-dead thing. Her husband remained still beside her, his back unmoving, his breathing so faint it might as well not exist. She wanted to shake him, to scream for him to wake up, to save her from this waking nightmare. But deep down, some primal part of her knew the truth. If he could wake, he would have by now. Whatever lay next to her in the darkness wasn't a husband, not anymore. The pressure on the bed shifted slightly, the mattress creaking beneath an invisible weight as it drew closer to her. Her eyes, wide with terror, stung from tears she couldn't stop. She dared not blink. The cold brush of air against her ear made her stomach twist violently. "I want to see," the voice whispered again, softer now but with a venomous edge that sent her skin crawling. "I want to see if you're ready." She tried to speak, her lips trembling, but only a strangled whimper escaped. The presence seemed to lean in closer. "You let me in," it said. Her mind recoiled in horror. She hadn't let anything in. She hadn't opened a door, hadn't spoken an invitation, hadn't even thought of such a thing. But somewhere, deep in the recesses of her memory, a faint flash stirred, an image of her standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., staring at the front door with her hand on the knob. The memory felt foreign, like a scene from someone else's life, but it pulsed in her skull with cruel insistence. She had opened the door, not to anyone she knew, not even to anything she could see, but she had opened it. And now it was here. "No," she croaked out, her voice shaking. I didn't let you in." Silence answered her, so complete, it made her ears ring. Then came a sound, faint but unmistakable, the slow scrape of nails dragging across the wooden floorboards. It circled her bed, deliberate and unhurried, like a predator sizing up its prey. Her fists clenched around the blanket, her knuckles aching from the pressure. She felt it stop at the foot of the bed. Then, with agonizing slowness, the mattress dipped again. It was climbing onto the bed. Closer, closer still. The hair on her neck stood on end as she felt cold breath ghost across her cheek. "Look at me," it whispered, its tone almost coaxing. Her body screamed not to obey. Every instinct told her to keep her eyes fixed ahead, to lock her muscles and pretend to be asleep. But the voice persisted. "Look at me." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were patient, sure of themselves, knowing she would eventually break. The air grew colder, thick with a dampness that clung to her skin like mold. She could feel it now, not just a presence but a shape, crouched behind her with a weight and mass that defied logic. Its breath carried that same rotten sweetness, and beneath it, a faint hum vibrated in her skull. Her lips quivered as she struggled to form words. "Please," she whispered, barely audible even to herself. "Don't," the voice hummed, a sound like laughter strangled by rage. "Look at me." The mattress shifted once more, the cold breath brushing against her eyelid now, as though it knew how badly she was fighting to keep them shut. She bit down on her lip until she tasted blood. The pain grounded her for only a second. Then came the faintest sensation, a hand, icy and skeletal, grazing her shoulder. "Good girl," it hissed. "You're so close." She thought she would faint. Her body quaked under its unseen touch, her muscles screaming to flee, even as they betrayed her. The whispers started again, no longer one voice but many, layered over each other in a chorus of unintelligible words. Some were angry, others mournful, and some laughed. The sound filled the room, growing louder, pressing against her eardrums until she thought they might burst. She wanted to cover her ears, to shut it out, but her arms wouldn't move. The whispers were inside her head now, slithering like oil through her thoughts. Her vision blurred as tears streamed down her cheeks in steady rivulets. "You're not real," she whispered hoarsely, the words barely forming past the lump in her throat. "You're not real." The laughter stopped instantly. Silence crashed down again, heavier than before. Then, a single whisper so close it seemed to originate from the hollow of her skull. "Neither are you." Her breath hitched violently. The words made no sense, yet they burrowed deep, curling in her mind like a parasite. She didn't understand, didn't want to understand. Her fingers twitched as she forced herself to grip the blanket tighter. If she could just stay still, maybe it would leave. Maybe the night would end, and she'd wake in sunlight to find none of this had been real. But the presence wasn't leaving. It shifted again, weight pressing down on the bed as it crawled closer. "I waited for you," it murmured. "I've been waiting so long." Her heart pounded erratically, each beat a sharp stab in her ribs. "What are you?" she whispered through chattering teeth. A pause, then, softly, "The one you called." Her mind flashed to that half-remembered moment in the hallway, hand on the doorknob, whispering something into the void. She didn't remember the words, but the truth clawed at her now. She had called for it. The realization broke something inside her. A sob tore from her throat as she squeezed her eyes shut tighter. The whispers rose again, louder, angrier now. She felt the bed shift violently, as though many hands gripped the mattress from below. The air buzzed with electricity, her hair standing on end. "Wake up," the chorus of voices demanded in unison. "Wake up." The force of their command reverberated through her skull until her vision exploded with white. Her body convulsed as her lungs seized, no air getting in, her fingers clawing helplessly at the sheets. She thought she might be dying. Maybe that was their goal. Maybe she'd already died. Then, as suddenly as it began, the voices stopped. The bed stilled, the air cleared, and she heard only one sound, the slow, steady breathing of her husband. It took her several seconds to realize she was no longer lying down. She was sitting bolt upright in bed, clutching her chest, drenched in sweat. The digital clock read 3:07 a.m. The room was silent, too silent. Her husband lay beside her, turned away, his breathing faint but there. No knocking, no whispers, nothing. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe it had been a dream, a terrible, vivid nightmare. She let out a shaky breath and wiped at her damp face with trembling fingers. But as she lowered her hand, her stomach dropped. There were long black smudges across her fingertips, like soot or ash. The black smudges on her fingers stared back like an accusation. She rubbed her hands together, frantic, hoping they would wipe clean. But the soot-like residue only smeared across her palms, streaking darker as if feeding on her panic. A metallic scent wafted up, sharp and coppery, making her stomach lurch violently. She clutched the edge of the blanket to steady herself, eyes darting to the clock. 3:08 a.m. The seconds ticked by with mechanical indifference, as though time itself had no stake in her terror. Her husband's steady breathing was the only sound in the room, but even that offered no comfort. She couldn't bring herself to look at him, not after what she felt earlier, the coldness of his skin, the unnatural stillness. Her heart thudded painfully, a relentless hammer in her chest as the memory replayed. The knocks, the whispers, the voice saying she had called it. She hadn't called anyone, had she? She pressed her filthy hands to her face, willing her thoughts to quiet, but another sensation broke through. Her cheek was wet. Slowly she lowered her hands and saw streaks of black across her fingers again. Not just soot, tears of ash. She was crying it. She couldn't comprehend it. Ash where tears should be. It felt impossible, yet there it was, staining her trembling fingers. A faint noise made her freeze. Not a knock this time, something softer. A shuffle of movement from across the room. Her eyes darted to the closet door. It was still cracked open, a thin slice of darkness bleeding out into the room. She could have sworn she'd closed it before climbing into bed, but she wasn't sure of anything anymore. The air shifted again, heavier, colder, the faint smell of decay creeping back. Her pulse quickened, blood roaring in her ears. Then it came, a single knock, barely audible, from inside the closet. She flinched violently, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried weight, like a reminder, like a threat. She gripped the sheets tighter, her knuckles aching from the strain. The knock came again, then a whisper, still awake. Her stomach twisted painfully, bile rising in her throat. The voice was no longer coaxing or patient. It was amused, mocking. She could almost see it in her mind's eye, crouched behind the door, grinning with too many teeth. She shut her eyes tight and shook her head, whispering to herself, "This isn't real, this isn't happening." But the whisper came again, closer now, vibrating through her skull. Her breath hitched sharply. The closet door creaked as it shifted slightly, opening wider by an inch. The darkness spilling from it seemed thicker, denser, almost tangible now. She wanted to wake her husband, scream, hit him, anything, but her voice died in her throat. Something told her he wouldn't respond. Not this time, not ever. A soft scuttling sound echoed from inside the closet, like fingernails dragging across wood. It made her skin crawl. She stared at the door, too terrified to blink, waiting for a shadow, a hand, anything to emerge. But nothing came. Only that oppressive silence that felt worse than any sound. Then her phone lit up on the nightstand. The sudden glow startled her so badly, she nearly screamed. The screen showed no calls or messages, only a single notification. 3:09 a.m. Do you see it yet? Her hands shook violently as she reached for the phone, her finger hesitating over the screen. Before she could touch it, the screen flickered and changed. A new message appeared. Don't look away. She felt a scream rising in her chest, trapped like a living thing clawing for escape. Her eyes shot back to the closet door instinctively, and she nearly choked on her breath. A pale skeletal hand had emerged from the crack, its long fingers splayed against the door frame. The skin was grey and papery, stretched too tightly over bones. The hand shifted slightly, nails dragging slow grooves into the wood, as it pushed the door open another inch. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. The hand froze as if it heard her. Then came another whisper, so close it vibrated through the room. I said, don't look away. Her body betrayed her. Her gaze snapped back to her phone screen in a desperate bid for something, anything, that wasn't the horror unfolding before her. The screen now showed a single word, run. Her chest constricted. She looked back at the closet door and froze. The hand was gone. The door stood wide open, revealing nothing but a yawning black void inside. Her heart thundered wildly, each beat echoing like a drum in her skull. She wanted to believe it was empty, that there was nothing there. But the darkness felt alive, shifting subtly like a creature breathing. Then she saw them, eyes, countless pinpricks of pale light, staring back at her from the void, unblinking, hungry. A chorus of whispers rose from the darkness, overlapping, chaotic. Stay, stay, stay. Her trembling legs refused to obey. She wanted to run, to flee the house, and never look back. But her body felt rooted to the bed. The whisper turned into a hiss. Stay. The sound rattled the windows, the clock, the bed frame. She clutched the sheets to her chest as the air thickened, suffocating, pressing down on her like water. A shape moved in the closet, huge and shifting, barely visible in the oppressive darkness. Long, spindly limbs stretched and twisted, the faint outline of a head cocking unnaturally to one side. It stepped closer to the threshold. She could almost feel its breath again, wet, sour, heavy. Her phone vibrated violently in her hand, the screen flickering as new words appeared. "You're out of time." Her eyes darted between the screen and the door. The shape was inches from crossing the threshold now. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. "Wake up, wake up." She clamped her hands over her ears, her whole body shaking violently as a scream tore free from her lips. But no sound came out. The scream tore from her throat, but it died in the air like a sound swallowed whole. Her mouth hung open, her chest heaving with the effort, yet the room remained oppressively silent. Not even her own breathing reached her ears anymore. The void in the closet seemed to consume all sound, all light, pulling reality inward like a collapsing star. The shape inside moved again, impossibly tall and thin, its limbs bending at angles that made her stomach twist violently. It hovered at the threshold, its featureless face tilting as though curious. Slowly, one long arm stretched forward, and a hand, grey, skeletal, and tipped with impossibly sharp nails, wrapped around the doorframe. The wood splintered under its grip with a faint crack. Her body screamed at her to run, to leap from the bed, and bolt for the door, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was paralyzed, every nerve locked in place as her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped animal. Her phone vibrated violently in her hand again, the screen flickering with a new message. "It's crossing." She didn't need the warning. She could see it. The thing's other arm snaked out, fingers curling into the floor as it began to drag itself forward. The whispers returned, louder now, filling her head with a chorus of voices speaking in unison. Some wept, some screamed. Others chanted words she couldn't understand, their cadence growing faster, more frenzied with every passing second. The air thickened until each breath felt like swallowing mud. Her vision blurred at the edges as panic sent her pulse into a dizzying spiral. She clawed at her throat, desperate for air, but her lungs refused to fill. The creature's head turned slowly, and though it had no eyes, she felt its gaze burn into her like hot iron. Her fingers tightened around the phone in her hand, her only tether to something that felt remotely real. The screen pulsed faintly, a single word flashing over and over again, but she couldn't move. Even as her body screamed in agony, even as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar inside her skull, she remained rooted in place. The creature's first foot, long, clawed and grotesquely thin, emerged from the closet and set down silently on the floorboards. The second followed. It was in the room now. A fresh wave of terror crashed over her, and this time she felt her bladder threaten to give way. She clenched every muscle in her body, shaking violently as tears, dark, ash-like streaks, ran freely down her face. The thing began to straighten its impossibly long frame, towering so tall, its head nearly brushed the ceiling. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. It moved with the slow confidence of a predator certain its prey had no chance of escape. The whispers shifted in tone suddenly, overlapping in chaotic, high-pitched laughter that grated against her eardrums. One voice broke through the others, low, guttural, and infinitely cold. "Mine," it hissed. Her hands flew to her ears, pressing hard as if she could block the sound out. But the voice came from within her mind now. "You called me," it said. "You let me in." The memory hit her like a hammer, standing in the hallway, whispering into the void. "If someone's there, I can't do this alone." She hadn't meant it. She didn't even remember saying it. But she had. The thing stepped closer. The floorboards creaked under its weight. Though its body looked impossibly frail, its limbs stick-thin and elongated. Each step was deliberate, echoing in the suffocating silence. Her husband remained still beside her, his back turned, his breathing eerily steady. She wanted to reach for him, to shake him awake, but a cold certainty anchored her in place. If she touched him, it wouldn't be him anymore. The whispers in her head rose again, each word scraping against her sanity. "Look at me." She squeezed her eyes shut, trembling violently as she muttered under her breath, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." But the voice hissed again, louder now, right at her ear. Open, against her will, her eyelids fluttered. A faint, sickly glow emanated from where the creature's face should be. 2 pinpricks of pale light burning like dying stars. Its featureless head tilted as though amused. "Good," it whispered. "You're learning." Her pulse slammed against her skull as she choked back a sob. She wanted to run, to scream, to wake up from this nightmare. But every time she blinked, the creature seemed closer, its face hovering just inches from hers. The scent of rot filled her nostrils, making her stomach churn violently. "What do you want?" she rasped out, her voice hoarse and breaking. The thing cocked its head again, and for a moment, the whispers went silent. Then came its reply, soft, almost gentle. "To stay." The words froze her blood. "This house, this bed, this body." It reached a long grey finger toward her chest, tapping lightly where her heart pounded like a drum. "Mine now." Panic exploded in her veins as her phone buzzed violently in her hand. The screen showed only 2 words, "Wake up." She didn't understand. Wasn't she awake? Wasn't this real? She bit down hard on her lip, the taste of copper flooding her mouth. "I am awake," she whispered desperately. The creature's face leaned closer, until all she could see was darkness. Not yet. The room shattered. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched ringing that sent her hands flying to her ears. Her vision fractured into shards of light and color as the whispers turned to shrieks. The creature vanished in a blink, replaced by a suffocating black void that seemed to swallow her whole. She felt herself falling, tumbling through endless darkness as unseen hands clawed at her skin, tugging, pulling, tearing. Her screams echoed soundlessly into the void. Then, with a suddenness that stole the air from her lungs, she slammed back into her body. She gasped, eyes flying open. The room was silent. The clock read 3:09 a.m. Her husband lay beside her, breathing softly. The closet was shut.
Everything looked normal, too normal. Her hands trembled violently as she reached for her phone. The screen was blank. No messages, no notifications, just the time glowing faintly. She let out a shaky breath, tears streaking her face. But then she saw it, on the inside of her bedroom door. 3 long black scratches.
The scratches on the door were impossibly deep. 3 jagged lines, dark as pitch, carved into the white paint with a precision that spoke of deliberate malice. Her breath hitched violently as her mind tried to grasp the impossible. She hadn't heard anything. No scraping, no pounding, yet the marks were fresh, the edges curling with splinters where wood had been gouged away. Her legs felt weak, rubbery under her trembling body, but she forced herself to stand. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet, colder than it should have been, as if some of the void's darkness had seeped into the wood itself. She took a hesitant step toward the door, her fingers outstretched, as if to prove to herself it was real. The moment her skin brushed the gouges, a sharp chill shot up her arm, so intense she yelped and jerked her hand back. Her breath fogged faintly in front of her face. Now, the temperature had dropped again. She stumbled back to the bed and sat heavily, clutching her chest as her pulse hammered out of control. She dared a glance at her husband. He hadn't stirred, not once, throughout the entire ordeal. His stillness was almost worse than the scratches, worse than the voice. Slowly, dread curling tighter in her gut, she reached out a trembling hand and pressed her fingers lightly to his arm. It was warm. Relief nearly broke her in half. But then his breathing stopped. Her hand recoiled as if burned. The sound of his slow, steady breaths had been her one fragile tether to reality, and now even that was gone. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling, breaking in the frigid air. She shook him lightly at first, then harder. "Wake up. Please, wake up." Nothing. Not a twitch. Not a gasp. Her heart raced wildly as she grabbed his shoulder and rolled him toward her. His face stared back at her, eyes wide open, lifeless. The scream caught in her throat, strangling her as tears blurred her vision. "No, no, no, no," she sobbed, shaking her head violently. But even as she cried, she realized something horrific. His eyes weren't right. The irises were pale, almost white, the pupils so dilated they nearly consumed them. And worst of all, his lips were moving, slowly, silently, forming words she couldn't hear. She leaned in, trembling violently as she strained to listen. Then, faint and distant, she heard his voice, not from his mouth, but from inside her own head. "It's still here." Her blood ran cold. His mouth moved again. "Don't turn around." Every muscle in her body tensed. She wanted to ask why, to beg him for an answer, but her lips refused to form words. She sat frozen, unable to tear her gaze from his dead, pale face. Her peripheral vision screamed at her. Something was behind her. The air was heavier now, crushing her chest until every breath felt like razor blades, slicing her lungs. The faint stench of rot grew stronger, suffocating her. "Don't turn," her husband's voice said again, louder now, desperate. But her body betrayed her. Slowly, mechanically, her head began to turn, as though some unseen hand was forcing it. The shadows on the far wall writhed and pulsed, shifting into shapes her mind couldn't fully comprehend. Elongated limbs, too many fingers, faces that melted into each other like wax figures left in the sun. Her heart hammered violently, each beat an explosion in her ears,
as her gaze finally landed on the thing standing directly behind her. It was taller now, or maybe it had always been that tall, its head bowed to fit beneath the low ceiling, limbs impossibly long, its hands dragging along the floor as it leaned toward her, its featureless face tilted, the faint glow of pale light where eyes should have been flickering like dying embers. The whispers returned, a chorus of voices overlapping in her mind. Some pleaded, others laughed, all of them speaking the same phrase over and over. Let me stay. Her breath caught in her throat as tears burned hot against her frozen cheeks. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare. Slowly, its hand rose, fingers stretching impossibly far as it reached for her face. Her phone vibrated violently on the bed beside her, the screen flashing one word over and over. Resist. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her body refused to listen. The creature's fingers brushed her temple, and in that instant, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar. Her vision fractured, colors bleeding into each other as her thoughts spiraled out of control. She saw flashes, herself standing in the hallway, whispering into the darkness, her husband lying lifeless on the floor, the house crumbling into the same void she'd seen in her dreams. You called me, the thing said, its voice no longer a whisper but a guttural growl that seemed to reverberate from the walls themselves. Now I'm home. Its fingers pressed harder against her skull, and pain flared like wildfire behind her eyes. She screamed, her voice raw and ragged as black tears poured freely down her face. The room began to twist, the walls folding inward like a house of cards. She clutched her head, sobbing violently. Make it stop, she screamed. Please, make it stop. The creature's face leaned closer. Wake up. The words slammed into her with the force of a freight train. Her eyes flew open as she bolted upright in bed. Sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains. The clock read 7:03 a.m. She gasped for air, her chest heaving as her heart pounded out of control. Her husband lay beside her, still asleep. No scratches on the door, no whispers, no smell of decay. It was over. It had to be over. She pressed a trembling hand to her face, flinching when she felt wetness on her cheeks. Pulling her hand away, her stomach dropped. Her fingers were streaked black. Not water, not sweat, ash, and then she heard it. 3 slow knocks on the bedroom door.
The knocks came again, 3 slow, deliberate strikes that vibrated through the wooden door like a heartbeat from the other side. Her body locked up instantly, every muscle rigid as her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the door, her mind screaming for explanation. It was morning. Sunlight streamed weakly into the room, catching the floating dust motes in a golden haze. Her husband still lay motionless beside her, breathing softly. For a split second, she almost convinced herself the knocks were normal. Maybe the pipes, maybe the house settling. But deep down, she knew better. These were not the accidental creaks of a tired house. These knocks carried a weight, a presence, an intelligence that turned her veins to ice. She didn't move, didn't breathe. She only watched the door as the silence between each knock stretched on endlessly. Then came the whisper, not from the door, not from the air, but from directly inside her skull. Let me in. The voice was soft, almost childlike, but laced with something ancient and cold. She clamped her hands over her ears, as though she could force it out, but the voice persisted, louder now. Let me in. Her fingers dug into her scalp until her nails bit skin. I didn't call you, she rasped, tears welling. The voice chuckled. A sound like dry leaves scraping across concrete. Didn't you? Her heart slammed in her chest so violently, she thought it might burst. She shook her head, her tangled hair whipping across her tear-streaked face. I didn't, she whispered again, but her voice lacked conviction, because somewhere, buried deep in her memory, she remembered the night weeks ago, when she'd stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, as she whispered, I don't want to be alone anymore. At the time it felt meaningless, a half-conscious plea tossed into the void during a night of exhaustion and loneliness. But now, the weight of those words crushed her like a physical force. The voice hissed again, closer this time. You opened the door. I stepped through. Her eyes darted to the bedroom door, still shut but emanating that suffocating presence. She forced herself to take a shallow breath. Maybe if she stayed perfectly still, it would go away. Maybe if she ignored it long enough, reality would stitch itself back together. But the knocks came again, faster now. 3 sharp raps that rattled the door frame. Her husband stirred beside her, murmuring incoherently as he shifted under the covers. Hope flared briefly in her chest. If he woke up, maybe he could hear it too. Maybe she wasn't losing her mind. She reached a trembling hand toward him, but before her fingers could touch his shoulder, the voice returned, this time from behind her. He won't wake up. Every nerve in her body screamed. She froze, her outstretched hand shaking violently as tears blurred her vision. The whisper was so close, she could feel the faint brush of breath against her neck. Her pulse hammered erratically as her mind screamed at her not to turn around. She forced her hand back to her lap, clutching the sheets so tightly her knuckles ached. Why are you doing this? She whispered hoarsely. A pause, then almost tenderly. Because you're mine now. The door creaked suddenly, not the bedroom door this time, but the closet. Her head snapped toward it, her stomach twisting violently. It had been shut. She was certain it had been shut. Now it hung open by an inch, darkness pooling out like smoke. She stared at the gap, willing it to stay still, but the shadows inside writhed faintly, as though breathing. She dug her nails into her palms until hot blood welled. A new whisper slithered from the closet. Come see me. No, she croaked out, shaking her head violently. No, I won't. The voice let out a low, amused hum. You already have. The words sent an icy spike of dread down her spine. Her phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, making her flinch. She snatched it up with trembling hands. The screen flickered, the brightness blinding in the dim light. A single message scrawled across it. Don't look away from the door. Her stomach dropped. Her eyes darted back to the bedroom door, just as it rattled violently on its hinges. Something was trying to get in. The handle twitched once, twice, then began to turn slowly with an agonizing squeal of metal. Her entire body shook as she pressed herself back against the headboard. Please, she whispered to no one in particular. Please, stop. But the handle kept turning. A low guttural growl vibrated through the wood as the door shuddered under invisible blows. Her phone buzzed again. New words flashed on the screen. It's in the house. Her stomach twisted into a painful knot. The door handle snapped back suddenly, and the rattling stopped. Silence fell heavy and absolute. She waited, every muscle tense, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The shadows under the door deepened, thickened, until they looked more like liquid than darkness. Then slowly, something slid into view. Long, spindly fingers, grey and bone-thin, crept under the door, curling like the legs of a spider. Her lips trembled as she clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. The fingers splayed across the floor, tapping lightly in a rhythm that echoed the 3 knocks she'd heard before. Her phone buzzed again. Don't let it see you. She didn't know what that meant. Didn't know how she could possibly stop it from seeing her when it already felt like it was inside her mind. The fingers withdrew suddenly, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. A soft whisper followed from the other side of the door, impossibly gentle. I'm closer than you think. Her body shook with silent sobs as her mind raced for solutions, prayers, mantras, anything to drive it away. She gripped her phone like a lifeline, scrolling frantically for some kind of message, some hint at what she was supposed to do. But the screen flickered violently and went black. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass, her wide eyes ringed with exhaustion, tears streaking her ash-stained cheeks. Then her reflection blinked. Wrong, too slow, too deliberate. Her heart stopped as the reflection smiled faintly, though her own lips hadn't moved. The whisper came again, this time from the phone itself. Let me in. She flung the phone across the room with a cry, watching as it clattered to the floor and slid under the bed. The room was silent again, except for her ragged breathing. She turned back to the closet. The door stood wide open now. A shape moved inside, long limbs unfolding like a spider, stretching after sleep. You can't shut me out, the voice hissed. I'm already here. The shape in the closet twisted as if waking from an ancient slumber. Its limbs cracked with slow, deliberate motion, the popping of joints echoing like branches under strain. Each movement seemed to stretch further than possible, arms lengthening, torso expanding, a grotesque silhouette unfolding against the ink-black void. She couldn't blink. Her breath was caught in her throat like a splinter, every muscle locked in paralyzing dread. It had no eyes, yet she knew it saw her. She could feel its focus, sharp, surgical, stripping her thoughts bare. Her mind screamed for her to look away, but her body was held in place by something deeper than fear. Her fingers twitched near her lap, numb and tingling, useless against the cold sweeping through the room. Her phone vibrated under the bed, the familiar hum, now a strange and distant sound, as if muffled by water. The voice returned, not a whisper now, but a murmur inside her head, low and cruel. You kept the door open, it said, almost amused. You never closed it all the way. She wanted to scream that she hadn't meant to, that it had closed itself, or at least she thought it had. But the voice laughed, and the air around her shifted, tightening, closing in. You thought it was nothing, it said, but I was already listening. She wanted to move, to throw the blankets off and sprint from the bed, but her body remained anchored, limbs heavy as stone. Something was brushing against her hair now, slow and methodical, like fingers combing through it, cold, dry. She trembled, but didn't dare flinch. A whimper escaped before she could stop it, and the creature froze. For a moment, everything stilled, time, breath, even the air itself. Then a whisper by her ear, soft as silk. You always wanted someone close. Her breath hitched. She stared forward, unable to blink, unable to cry. The voice seeped into her bones, coating her thoughts with static. Don't pretend you didn't call me. I only come when I'm wanted. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but her jaw refused to open. Behind her something shifted, another limb dragging across the floorboards, then another. It wasn't alone anymore. Her thoughts broke apart in chaos. Something deep within her tried to recall prayers, mantras, logic, but all of it drowned beneath the sheer wrongness in the room. You left the door open, the voice said again, almost tender now. I came through. Her eyes darted to the closet once more. The shape had changed. It no longer resembled the silhouette of a man or any human thing. Limbs tangled and extended at impossible angles, and the way it breathed, if it was breathing, made her stomach churn. It undulated, as if waterlogged, with a slick, glistening texture beneath the shadows. Her phone buzzed again, under the bed. She couldn't reach it, couldn't see the screen, but she imagined what it might say. Don't respond. That warning flashed in her mind, not because she read it, but because something inside her knew it was right. She bit her lip, hard. Her body begged for a response, anything to break the pressure in the room. She was going to scream. She knew she was, but the thing behind her spoke again, this time with something disturbingly close to concern. Why do you still fight it? Her shoulders jerked as her breath came in hiccuped gasps. Why do you still think this is your home? Her vision blurred as tears welled again, hot and thick and burning against skin already raw. Because it was, she choked. It was mine. The creature paused. The pressure in the air shifted, warping like heat waves on pavement. Then why did you invite me in? It asked softly. She didn't answer, not because she had nothing to say, but because part of her was beginning to believe it. That night, weeks ago, alone in the hallway, heart cracked open by exhaustion, whispering words into the dark. Had that been an invitation? Had her grief and need pulled something through that crack in reality? You opened the door, it whispered again, echoing the thought she'd just had, and I walked in. A faint, rusted laugh followed. That's all it takes. One moment of weakness, one whisper meant for no one. Her pulse roared in her ears, the shadows twisted tighter around her body, curling like vines of smoke. Then a different sound, a short breath, a stir beside her. Her husband turned slightly under the blanket, murmuring in his sleep. Her heart surged. Maybe he'd wake. Maybe she wasn't alone in this. Maybe she reached toward him. But as she did, the voice coiled around her mind once more. He's not yours anymore. Her hand stopped. Her pulse stuttered. She turned her head slowly, hoping, praying that the thing was lying. Her husband's face was turned toward her now, but his expression was all wrong. His eyes were wide open and staring straight through her. The skin beneath them was bruised and paper-thin, veins rising like ink beneath parchment. You let it in, he said softly, though his lips didn't move. The voice came from inside her head. You thought I couldn't feel it, but I did. She recoiled violently, crawling backward across the bed, until her back hit the headboard. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You're not him. But part of her feared she was wrong. Part of her feared that some piece of him still lingered, trapped and watching, helpless. He's watching, the voice confirmed. But I wear him now. She screamed, a sound so raw it tore her throat, and reached for the phone beneath the bed. Her fingers brushed it. Then something grabbed her wrist. It wasn't a hand. Not quite. It felt like flesh and bone, but it pulsed, like something alive. It coiled around her wrist with tendons that flexed like worms beneath the skin. She tried to yank free, but it held tight, pulling her slowly toward the open closet. Her feet kicked against the mattress, tearing at the sheets. Her free hand clawed for anything to hold on to, but the voice only laughed. You want someone to see you. I do. I always will. Her body slid slowly across the bed, inch by inch toward the waiting dark. Her fingers wrapped around the phone just as she was pulled to the edge. The screen flickered to life.
4 words flashed in pulsing red. Call your name back. Her voice was gone. Her throat was ruined, but she forced it out. Whispered it once, then louder. Her name. The grip on her wrist loosened. She screamed it again, and the room shattered.
The sound of her own name echoed through the bedroom, like a stone dropped in still water, rippling, distorting the air. For a moment, everything stilled. The grip on her wrist slackened, then tore away violently, as if burned. She tumbled backward across the mattress, clutching her phone to her chest like a lifeline. Her breaths came in jagged, broken gasps. The shadows that had seeped from the closet began to churn violently now, boiling as though some unseen force had been enraged. She could hear it. Low, guttural snarls rising from the void. "You can't take it back," the voice hissed. "You gave it freely." She shook her head violently, tears streaking her raw cheeks. "It's mine," she choked out, her voice trembling but firm. "You can't have it." The snarling deepened into a sound so low, it vibrated her bones. The closet door slammed shut with a thunderous crack, rattling the pictures on the walls. The pressure in the room lessened, but not completely. It was still here. She knew it, lurking, watching, waiting. Her husband's body shifted slightly beside her, and her breath caught. She dared a glance, terrified of what she might see. His eyes were closed again. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. He was sleeping, or perhaps he had never woken at all. The voice had lied. It had used his image, his voice, as a mask. The realization made her stomach twist violently, bile rising in her throat. She wanted to reach out, to confirm he was real, but fear rooted her hands to her lap. What if touching him broke whatever fragile boundary kept the creature at bay? Her phone buzzed faintly in her trembling hands. The screen flickered before flashing a new message in stark white text. "It's not over. It never is." Her pulse spiked violently. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, but something deep inside whispered that it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this reality. Her thumb hovered over the screen, desperate for answers, for some sign this wasn't all in her head. Another message appeared, as though in response. "The knocking will come again. Don't answer." Her stomach turned to ice. She stared at the screen. Her reflection walked in the black glass between flickers. Slowly, as if drawn by invisible strings, her gaze drifted to the bedroom door. She hadn't even noticed it was ajar. A faint line of darkness stretched between the door and its frame, unnatural and thick, like spilled ink. Her chest tightened. The silence in the house felt too complete, like the world beyond the door no longer existed. Then, soft and deliberate, 3 knocks echoed through the wood. She jumped, her phone slipping from her grasp and bouncing onto the mattress. Her breathing quickened, shallow and rapid as tears filled her eyes. The knocks came again, louder this time, as if the creature sensed her hesitation. "Don't answer," she whispered to herself, clutching her arms around her knees. "Don't answer." But the knocking persisted, each strike vibrating through her skull. Then came the voice, soft, pleading, so familiar it nearly broke her. "It's me. Let me in." Her husband's voice. "No," she whispered, shaking violently. "You're not him." But part of her wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. What if he was trapped out there, locked out by her fear? The voice came again, cracked with desperation. "Please, I'm cold. It's so dark out here." Her chest ached. The creature's manipulation was almost perfect.
Almost. She forced herself to remember the lifeless eyes, the bruised skin, the way it had spoken through him earlier. It wasn't him. It had never been him. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking back and forth as the knocks grew violent, the handle rattling, as though something was trying to force its way in. The voice rose in pitch, a wail of agony that nearly splintered her mind. "Let me in," it screamed, no longer her husband's voice, but something guttural and monstrous. Her hands clamped over her ears. "No," she whispered again, her voice trembling but steady. "You can't come in. Not anymore." The pounding stopped. Silence swallowed the room again, so heavy it felt suffocating. She dared a shaky breath, her heart thundering in her chest. Then, faintly, a whisper, not from the door, not from the closet, but from directly beside her ear. "Good girl," it hissed. Her body seized in terror, and she bolted upright. The bed was empty beside her. Her husband was gone. The blankets were rumpled, indented where his body had been, but the space was cold, devoid of warmth. Her pulse spiked violently as she scanned the room, eyes darting to the door, the closet, the corners where the shadows seemed unnaturally thick. "Where is he?" she demanded hoarsely. No answer, only the faint sound of something dragging across the floorboards beyond the door. She scrambled off the bed, clutching the phone with trembling fingers. The screen lit up again, words flashing urgently. "Don't follow." But her feet moved anyway, as though compelled by a force stronger than fear. She crept toward the door, each step slow and deliberate, the floorboards groaning under her weight. The air grew colder with every inch, her breath fogging faintly in front of her face. She reached for the door handle, her fingers trembling violently. The dragging sound stopped. Silence. Then from the other side, her husband's voice, weak, pained, and so heartbreakingly real. "Help me." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to run, to throw the door open, to pull him back to safety. But deep down, she knew it wasn't him, couldn't be him. The phone vibrated violently in her hand. "If you open it, it stays." She froze, her fingers inches from the handle. A single tear slipped down her cheek, hot against her cold skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered, backing away. The voice beyond the door broke into a low, guttural growl, words twisting into a language her mind couldn't comprehend. The door rattled violently once, twice, then stilled. The dragging resumed, moving away into the depths of the house. She didn't dare breathe until it was gone.
The dragging sound faded into silence, leaving the house steeped in an oppressive stillness that felt heavier than any noise. She stood frozen in the center of the room, the phone trembling violently in her hands, as if it, too, were afraid. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs, each beat sharp enough to hurt. She wanted to believe it was over, that the thing had retreated back into whatever dark corner it had come from. But deep down, she knew better. It hadn't left. It was waiting, watching. She could feel its presence like a cold breath against the back of her neck. Slowly, she backed away from the door until her knees hit the edge of the bed. She sat, clutching her phone so tightly her fingers ached. The screen lit again with new words. "It will try again." She swallowed hard, bile rising in her throat as her tears blurred the message. "I know," she whispered hoarsely, her voice cracked, thin and broken. "I don't know how much longer I can." The screen flickered violently, and another message appeared. "Stay awake." Her stomach twisted painfully. Stay awake? For how long? She hadn't slept properly in days, and her body was beginning to betray her. limbs heavy, eyelids dragging shut without permission. She wiped her face with trembling hands and forced herself to stand. The room swayed slightly around her, the shadows at the edges of her vision thickening like oil. She had to keep moving. If she sat still, she feared she wouldn't get back up. She inched toward the door, her hand resting lightly on the knob. The metal was ice cold, sending a sharp jolt up her arm. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening. Nothing, no dragging, no breathing, no whispers, just silence. But silence didn't mean safety. Her pulse thrummed in her ears as she eased the door open an inch. The hallway beyond was dark, unnaturally dark. Even though morning light should have flooded in from the windows, the shadows clung to the walls, shifting faintly like smoke. She swallowed hard and stepped out, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. The air in the hallway was colder, so cold her breath fogged in front of her as she exhaled shallowly. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the house itself resisted her movement. She glanced at the family photos lining the walls. Her stomach dropped. Their faces had changed. The smiling images were now warped, the eyes blackened out, mouths stretched too wide in silent screams. Her hands shook violently as she forced her gaze away. "Not real," she whispered to herself. "It's not real." But even as she said it, the photos seemed to quiver, the shadows within them rippling like disturbed water. She kept walking, her phone clutched tightly in her palm. A new message blinked on the screen. "The house isn't yours anymore." Her chest ached as she tried to steady her breathing. "Then whose is it?" she whispered back, her voice breaking. The answer came immediately. His. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She froze. The sound was faint at first, soft, deliberate, pacing. Then they grew louder, heavier. She turned sharply, but the hallway behind her was empty. Her phone vibrated violently, the screen flashing. "Don't look back again." Panic clawed at her throat. She quickened her pace, her feet stumbling as she reached the end of the hallway. The door to the living room loomed ahead, but even from here she could see the darkness pooling beneath it, thick and heavy like ink. A faint voice drifted from the other side, her husband's voice, calling her name. "Help me, please." It was softer now, almost defeated. She clenched her teeth, tears burning hot against her cheeks. "You're not him," she whispered, though doubt gnawed at her chest. "You're not him," the voice replied with a weak, broken sob. "It hurts. I don't want to be alone." Her nails dug into her palms, drawing hot, stinging blood. She pressed forward, refusing to answer. She reached the living room door and pressed her hand against it. The wood felt strange, warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, like something alive. She recoiled, her stomach churning violently. The voice on the other side grew louder, more insistent. "Let me out, please. It's so dark in here." She bit her lip until it split, tasting iron. "You're not him," she screamed. The voice stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural laugh that seemed to vibrate through the walls. "Clever little thing," it said, the words deep and wrong. "But clever doesn't save you." The door shuddered violently as something massive slammed against it from the other side. Dust rained from the ceiling. The vibrations rattled her teeth. Her phone buzzed again, nearly slipping from her grasp. "Leave now." She spun on her heel, sprinting down the hallway as the pounding grew louder, faster. The house groaned under the strain, floorboards creaking, walls cracking, as though the structure itself might collapse. She didn't look back.
She didn't dare. As she rounded the corner to the bedroom, she skidded to a halt. The closet door was open again, wider this time. From the darkness within, a single hand emerged, long, spindly fingers dragging across the floorboards like the legs of a spider. "You can't leave," the voice hissed, now coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Not without me." The hand stretched farther, impossibly long, grasping at the air. Her phone buzzed violently in her palm. The window. Go now. Without thinking, she bolted across the room, flinging herself at the window and shoving it open. Cold air rushed in, stinging her face. She climbed onto the sill, her bare feet slipping on the frosty surface. The voice roared behind her, a sound so loud it rattled her skull. "You're mine." The hand shot toward her ankle, brushing her skin. She screamed and kicked out violently, dislodging the fingers just enough to leap from the window. She hit the ground hard, pain exploding up her legs as she tumbled onto the frosted grass. Gasping for breath, she scrambled to her feet, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Behind her, the house loomed silent and still, its windows dark despite the morning light. She stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed one final time. "Don't go back, ever." She didn't need telling twice. She turned and fled, the sound of her own sobs carrying into the cold morning air. Behind her, the house stood watchful, patient, as though waiting for her to make the inevitable mistake.
She ran until her lungs burned, until the icy morning air tore at her throat like glass. Her bare feet pounded the frozen earth, every step sending shockwaves of pain up her legs from the jump. Behind her, the house grew smaller, yet its shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally far across the field, reaching for her even as she put distance between them. She didn't dare look back. She couldn't. Some primal part of her understood that to look would be to acknowledge it, to give it a thread to pull her back. Her phone vibrated violently in her clenched fist. She fumbled to look at the screen, the words flashing like a heartbeat. "Keep moving. Don't stop." Tears streaked her face, hot against the raw chill of the wind. Her thoughts raced wildly. Where could she go? The road ahead stretched endlessly, empty save for skeletal trees clawing at the sky. There were no houses in sight, no lights, no signs of life. Only her, alone in a world that felt suddenly foreign and wrong. Her legs screamed for rest, but she pressed on, her breaths coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The sky above hung heavy with clouds, thick and grey, as if the sun had been snuffed out entirely. The cold seeped into her bones, numbing her fingers despite the death grip on her phone. Then, faintly, she heard it again. 3 knocks, not from behind her, but ahead. She skidded to a halt, her chest heaving as her wide eyes scanned the barren field. Only the wind stirring the brittle grass, but the sound came again. Closer this time. Knock, knock. Her pulse hammered so hard, it drowned out everything else. The knocking wasn't from a door. It wasn't from any physical place. It was inside her head now, reverberating in her skull like a cruel echo. Her phone buzzed violently, and new words flashed. "It followed you." Her knees buckled slightly, and she bit down hard on her lip to stay upright. "How?" she whispered aloud, her voice barely a croak. But she knew, deep down, she'd known all along. You don't escape something you invited. Her breath fogged in front of her face as she forced herself forward again. Every step felt heavier, as though the ground itself wanted to swallow her whole. The road curved ahead, leading into a thin line of trees where the air seemed even colder, thicker, harder to draw into her lungs. She could feel it watching, not from behind her, not from the trees, but from somewhere deeper inside her, coiled like a parasite in her chest. "Why are you running?" the voice whispered, tender as a lover, but edged with mockery. "You're only running in circles. You've always been mine." She shook her head violently, clutching her phone tighter, until her knuckles whitened. "No," she whispered hoarsely, "you're lying." The voice chuckled softly, the sound vibrating through her ribs like a second heartbeat. "Am I? Tell me, why do you think the house was empty when you left?" Her stomach twisted violently. She hadn't seen her husband's body. She hadn't seen him at all. What if? No, she couldn't let it take root. She forced her feet to move faster, breaking into a desperate run. The path through the trees narrowed, branches clawing at her arms as she stumbled forward. Her breaths came in sharp, ragged sobs now, her vision blurred from tears and exhaustion. The phone vibrated again, the message stark and cold. "Don't speak. Don't respond." She clamped her jaw shut, even as the voice inside her head grew louder, more insistent. "You can't shut me out forever," it hissed. "Say my name. You remember it." She shook her head, stumbling over a root and nearly falling. "I don't," she mouthed silently, but she did. The sound of it hovered just at the edge of her memory, a foul, ancient syllable that had slipped into her mind during the sleepless nights. "Say it," the voice crooned. "Let me in properly. It's so lonely without you." Her teeth ground together painfully as she forced herself to focus on the path ahead. The trees began to thin slightly, and beyond them she could see a faint glow. Lights. A gas station. Relief crashed through her in violent waves, her legs propelling her forward faster than she thought possible. The lights grew closer, brighter, spilling weak illumination across the cracked pavement. A single attendant stood behind the counter inside, his head bowed as he read a newspaper. She could see him clearly through the glass, and for a moment, hope flared painfully in her chest. She sprinted across the parking lot, her bare feet slapping the cold concrete as she flung open the door. The warm air inside hit her like a wave, and she collapsed against the counter, gasping for breath. The attendant looked up, startled, his eyes wide. "Miss, are you? Call the police," she rasped, her voice shaking violently. "Please, there's something in my house. My husband." She froze. His expression had gone slack, his eyes dull and unseeing. His lips moved faintly, forming words she couldn't hear. She took a step back, her blood turning to ice. Then the whisper came, curling around her spine like a cold finger. "Found you." Her scream caught in her throat as the attendant's mouth stretched unnaturally wide, his jaw cracking with a sickening pop. A low, guttural laugh vibrated from his chest, wrong and hollow. "You thought you could run," the voice hissed, now slipping from his lips. "But you're part of me now." Her phone buzzed violently in her hand, the screen flashing a single word: fight. But how? Her legs felt rooted to the floor, her mind a swirl of terror and confusion. The attendant, or the thing wearing him, tilted its head, smiling with teeth far too sharp. "Say it," it crooned again. "Say my name." She backed toward the door, clutching the phone like a weapon. "No," she said, her voice breaking. The creature's smile widened impossibly. "You already did." The door behind her rattled violently, as though slammed by an unseen force, the fluorescent lights above flickering in protest. She stumbled backward, clutching her phone so tightly it dug into her palm. The attendant's mouth still hung open in that grotesque grin, his jaw stretching impossibly far, teeth jagged like broken glass. "Say it," the voice hissed, vibrating through the floor tiles, through her bones, through her skull. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her chest tight and burning. "No," she whispered hoarsely, her words barely audible. She tried to focus on the phone in her hand, the glowing screen her only anchor. The text flashed again, sharp and urgent. "Do not speak his name," but her lips trembled. Deep inside, she could feel it, an almost magnetic pull toward the syllables, echoing faintly in her mind. It wasn't memory. It wasn't even thought. It was intrusion, something foreign threading itself through her neurons, like a virus. The attendant, or what remained of him, took a jerking step forward. His body moved wrong, like a puppet, tugged by too many invisible strings. "You know it," the voice said sweetly. "I gave it to you the first night. I knocked. You whispered it back to me, in your dreams. You thought it was a dream, didn't you?" Her throat tightened as fragments of half-remembered nights surfaced. Restless sleep, muttered words in the dark, shadows pressed too close to her skin. "You wanted someone to listen," it crooned. "You wanted someone to stay." The creature's head tilted at a nauseating angle, its smile splitting further until the skin around its lips began to tear. "I'm here. I'll never leave." Her knees threatened to buckle, but the phone buzzed violently, dragging her attention down. New words flashed: resist or be hollowed. She didn't know what hollowed meant, but her gut told her she didn't want to find out. She forced her legs to move, stepping back toward the door. "You're not real," she whispered, though the conviction in her voice faltered. The creature laughed, a sound so deep it rattled the glass refrigerator doors behind her. "Not real," it repeated mockingly. "And yet, I'm closer to you now than he ever was." Her breath hitched, her eyes darting to the clerk's name tag. David. She remembered the man's startled eyes when she burst in, the flicker of humanity before this thing consumed him. "Let him go," she croaked. The creature tilted its head again, almost curiously. "Why would I?" it whispered. "You didn't let me go." Her stomach twisted violently. You never said no," it interrupted, voice rising like a chorus of whispers overlapping and bleeding into each other. "That's all it takes. One unanswered knock, one whispered invitation." The lights flickered again, plunging the room into intermittent darkness. With each flash, the creature moved, closer, closer, its limbs jerking with unnatural speed. She spun on her heel and bolted, slamming into the door with her shoulder and bursting out into the icy air. She didn't stop to look back. Her bare feet slapped against the asphalt, the sharp gravel biting into her skin. The cold was merciless, cutting into her lungs with every ragged breath. She could hear it behind her, the scraping of limbs, the wet sound of flesh dragging across concrete. "You can't run from me," it hissed. "You never could." She clutched her phone like a lifeline, her eyes darting to the screen for guidance. The message was waiting for her. "Don't look. Don't answer." The words repeated in her head like a mantra as she tore down the empty road, her legs burning, her chest heaving violently. "Don't look. Don't answer. Don't look. Don't." The sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, not on a door this time, but directly behind her, as if the air itself was a hollow surface. She whimpered and covered her ears, but the sound echoed in her mind, rattling her teeth. "I'm getting closer," the voice whispered. "I'm not in the house anymore. I'm in you. Her stomach lurched. She could feel it now, a cold weight in her chest, spreading like frostbite through her veins. The road blurred around her, the edges of her vision darkening as her pace faltered. She stumbled and fell hard to her knees, skin scraping against the rough asphalt. The phone clattered from her hand, skidding a few feet away. She crawled toward it, fingers trembling violently. The screen blinked to life with a single word in massive red letters. Now. She didn't understand. Now, what? She snatched up the phone, clutching it to her chest as her ragged breaths fogged the air. The voice was louder now, deafening. Say it, say my name, let me out properly. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head violently. The creature laughed again, the sound vibrating through the ground beneath her palms. Then watch. She dared a glance over her shoulder and froze. The gas station was gone. So was the road. The world behind her had been replaced by a churning void of blackness, tendrils of shadow writhing like living things, and within the darkness, dozens, no, hundreds of hands, thin, pale hands clawing outward, dragging themselves over unseen surfaces. Some were human, some weren't. All were reaching for her. The cold weight in her chest surged, forcing her to her knees as she gasped for breath. Her vision blurred as she felt something rise up her throat. Not bile, but a sound, a word, its name. She clamped her mouth shut, tears streaming as her entire body trembled violently. Say it, the voice crooned again, impossibly close, or drown in me. Her phone buzzed again, one last urgent message flashing across the screen. Scream your own name. Her lips parted. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe, but she forced it out, voice breaking, raw and desperate. Her name, once, twice, louder the third time. The void recoiled violently, the hands retreating like insects from a flame. The pressure in her chest eased in an instant, replaced by burning air flooding her lungs. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing, clutching her phone to her chest as the shadows dissipated around her. The air tasted like iron as she dragged herself off the road, her knees raw and bleeding, her hands trembling violently as she clutched the phone to her chest. The world was silent again, but it wasn't the comforting silence of safety. It was the suffocating stillness of something lurking just beyond her senses. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, each inhale sharp enough to make her chest ache. She wanted to believe she'd won, that screaming her own name had driven it back, but deep down she knew better. That voice, it wasn't gone. It was quieter now, buried under the static of her thoughts, but she could still feel its presence, cold, patient, watching. Her phone screen lit up with a new message. You're not safe yet. She swallowed hard, bile rising in her throat as tears blurred her vision. Then where do I go? She whispered hoarsely. The phone didn't answer. The road stretched endlessly ahead, framed by skeletal trees whose bare branches seemed to claw at the grey sky. The world felt thinner now, like she was walking through a poorly drawn version of reality. Colors were muted, sounds were dampened. Even the air felt heavier, each breath clinging in her lungs like wet wool. She staggered forward on shaky legs, the cold gnawing mercilessly at her exposed skin. Her mind replayed the creature's words over and over. You never said no. How many times had she ignored the knocks in those early nights? How many times had she thought them harmless? Harmless, until she whispered in the dark, desperate for company, asking questions to no one. What's your name? She didn't remember saying it, but her gut twisted with the certainty that she had. A low sound drifted through the still air, soft at first, almost human. A sob. She froze, her head snapping toward the tree line. There it was again, a muffled, choked cry, like someone in pain. Her pulse spiked violently. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "Don't check. It's not real." But her feet betrayed her, dragging her toward the sound, as if pulled by invisible strings. The trees grew denser as she stepped off the road, the shadows thickening despite the weak daylight. The sobbing grew louder now, more desperate. She could almost make out words between the gasps. "Please, help me." Her chest tightened painfully. The voice was familiar, too familiar. "No," she whispered again, shaking her head violently. "You're not him," but part of her wanted to believe it. She pressed on despite the warning screaming in her mind. The trees closed in around her, their gnarled branches forming a tunnel of darkness. The sobbing shifted suddenly, cutting off mid-breath. Silence followed. The hair on the back of her neck prickled as she realized how quiet it had become. No wind, no birds, no distant cars, just silence. Then behind her, 3 soft knocks against bark. She spun around, her heart lurching into her throat. Nothing, only empty trees and the faint outline of the road beyond. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand, nearly slipping from her grasp. The message flashing in crimson text made her blood run cold. "Don't turn around again." Her breathing quickened as she pivoted back toward the path ahead. But it wasn't the same. The trees weren't the same. Their positions had shifted impossibly, forming a corridor that hadn't been there moments before. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stumbled forward, every step heavier than the last. The air grew colder, thick with a cloying scent like rotting leaves. And then she saw it, her husband, standing in the clearing ahead. His back was to her, his shoulders trembling with silent sobs. "You came," he whispered, his voice raw and broken. Her chest ached violently. "You're not real," she said hoarsely, though her resolve wavered. He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to glimpse his profile. His skin was grayish, almost translucent, veins pulsing faintly beneath the surface. "I'm so cold," he whispered. "Don't leave me here." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head violently. "You're not him," she croaked. But he stepped closer, his movements jerky and unnatural, as if his limbs didn't quite remember how to move. "Don't you love me anymore?" The words cut deeper than any blade. She clutched her phone like a talisman, praying for guidance. The screen flickered, then flashed a single word: "Run." Her legs reacted before her mind did, carrying her forward at a breakneck pace. Branches tore at her arms and face as she barreled through the trees, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Behind her, she heard the thing scream, not her husband's scream, but something lower, guttural, layered with voices. "You can't escape me." The trees thinned abruptly, and she burst out onto another road, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. Her feet burned from the rough ground. Her skin stung where branches had torn into her flesh, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The house may have been far behind her now, but she could feel it, the tether in her chest, the faint pull of the thing still trying to drag her back. Her phone vibrated weakly, its battery critically low. One last message flickered across the screen: "Keep moving until the sun." She looked up at the grey sky, the faintest glow on the horizon suggesting morning was near, but dawn had never felt farther away. Her legs felt like lead as she stumbled along the cracked asphalt, each step a monumental effort against the weight pressing down on her chest. The grey sky above remained fixed in its dull haze, offering no sign of morning, no hint of escape. She clutched the dying phone in her hand like a lifeline, its screen flickering faintly with static. "Keep moving until the sun," the words repeated in her mind like a prayer. Though doubt gnawed at her resolve, would there even be a sun? Or had the thing dragged her too far into its world, a place where light could never reach? A soft sound drifted through the stillness behind her, footsteps, slow, deliberate. She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She knew it was there. She could feel its eyes on her back, boring into her with cold, unblinking malice. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, each step leading her deeper into a landscape that felt subtly wrong. Houses she passed were lifeless husks, their windows black and empty like watching eyes. Trees along the roadside twisted unnaturally, their branches knotted into shapes that almost resembled hands. She quickened her pace despite her exhaustion, every muscle screaming in protest. The footsteps followed, never running, never faltering, just steady, patient pursuit. The phone buzzed weakly in her grasp, a new message stuttering onto the dim screen. "Don't acknowledge it." Her lips pressed tightly together, her jaw aching from the tension. Even without looking, she could feel it moving closer now, its breath cold against the nape of her neck. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate raps, not from a door but from directly beside her, as if the air itself had become a hollow surface. She flinched violently, but kept her gaze fixed ahead, forcing her feet to keep moving. The knocks came again, louder this time, reverberating through her bones. "I know you hear me," the voice whispered. It was soft now, almost tender. "Don't make me knock forever." She bit down on her tongue so hard she tasted copper, forcing her thoughts into a single refrain. "Don't respond. Don't look. Don't acknowledge." But the voice grew more insistent. "It's tiring, isn't it? Running in circles. You're already back where you started." Her stomach twisted violently, and she dared a glance at her surroundings. The road, the trees, the lifeless houses. They were familiar, too familiar. Panic surged through her like ice water. She had been here before. She was certain of it now. The road had folded in on itself, trapping her in an endless loop. She stumbled to a halt, her breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The voice laughed softly, the sound wrapping around her like a coil. "There's nowhere else to go. There never was." She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's a lie," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. Her phone buzzed weakly, the screen almost too dim to read. "Close your eyes. Walk." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Close her eyes. Blind herself in a place where it hunted her. The thought made her stomach churn. But the alternative, she didn't want to think about it. Summoning every shred of willpower, she squeezed her eyes shut. The world went black, and for a moment she thought she heard the faint sigh of wind. Or was it a breath, inches from her ear? She forced her legs forward, one trembling step at a time. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder, faster now, as if the creature had sensed her vulnerability. "You're clever," the voice whispered, closer than ever. "But clever doesn't save you. Not here." She kept moving, her hands outstretched slightly, to avoid unseen obstacles. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift subtly, the asphalt softening into something colder, slicker, like wet stone. A faint breeze brushed her face, carrying with it a scent of earth and decay. Her foot struck something solid, and she stumbled forward, her hands slamming into cold wood. A door. Her fingers traced its rough surface, searching blindly for a handle. The voice was louder now, rising in pitch. "Don't," it roared, its words reverberating through her skull like thunder. She found the handle and turned it without thinking, pushing the door open and stumbling inside. The air changed instantly, warmer though heavy, with the smell of mildew and dust. She dared to open her eyes. She was in a house, not her house. This one was smaller, older, its walls lined with peeling wallpaper and rotting wood. But there were no windows, no exits, only a single hallway stretching into darkness. Her phone buzzed faintly, the last of its battery flashing in a weak glow. You're close. Close to what? Salvation? Or something far worse? She didn't know, but there was no choice now. The hallway beckoned, its darkness thick and pulsing like a living thing. Behind her, the door slammed shut with a deafening crack, and she knew, without needing to turn, that it was here with her. The voice whispered one final time, soft and cruel, "You opened the door. That's all I ever needed." The hallway stretched endlessly, a suffocating tunnel of darkness that seemed to breathe around her, alive and pulsing with a faint sound like a heartbeat just beneath the floorboards. Every step felt heavier than the last, her legs trembling violently as if they no longer belonged to her. The air was thick and wet, clinging to her skin like a second layer, carrying with it the stench of rot and mildew that made her stomach twist violently. Her phone, now nothing more than a dead weight in her hand, had gone dark minutes ago. Its last message burned into her mind, "Keep moving until the sun." But there was no sun. There hadn't been sunlight for what felt like hours, only grey static skies, and an oppressive gloom that swallowed every sound she made. Somewhere behind her, soft footsteps echoed, not hurried, not faltering, just steady, patient steps, keeping pace no matter how fast she walked. She forced her gaze forward, her hands brushing the damp walls for balance. They felt wrong beneath her fingers, not cold wood or peeling wallpaper, but something softer, warmer, with a faint, almost imperceptible pulse. She flinched, jerking her hand away, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "You're almost home," a voice whispered faintly from somewhere in the dark. Her chest tightened violently, her lungs struggling to draw air. It wasn't real. She told herself it wasn't real, but the voice felt close enough that she could almost feel its icy breath on her neck. The sound of scratching joined the footsteps, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. Nails or claws raked against the unseen walls, leaving deep furrows that groaned like old wounds tearing open. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, her hands balling into fists, so tight her nails dug crescents into her palms. The hallway narrowed slightly, forcing her shoulders inward, as if the house were folding in on her. Her chest burned from effort, from fear, from something worse that slithered unseen beneath her ribs. The air felt heavier now, as though she were breathing water thick with unseen things swimming just out of reach. "Say it," the voice crooned again, tender and mocking. "Say my name and I'll make it stop." She shook her head violently, muttering, "No," under her breath like a prayer, though her voice cracked with each repetition. But the voice laughed softly, a sound that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You whispered it once," it said. "Do you remember? The first night you heard me knock. You asked who I was, and when I answered, you spoke my name back." Her stomach lurched violently, bile rising in her throat, as fragments of half-forgotten dreams clawed their way to the surface. The floor shifted under her feet with a sickening ripple, as though she were walking on flesh stretched thin over something that moved beneath her weight. She stumbled, catching herself on the wall, only to yank her hand back as the surface pulsed like muscle contracting around her fingers. Her breaths came faster now, shallow and loud in the oppressive silence. She forced her legs to keep moving, each step harder than the last, as the floor began to sag beneath her weight. The scratching grew louder still, joined now by whispering voices layered atop each other in dozens of overlapping tongues, some human, some too guttural, too alien to comprehend. Occasionally, her own name rose sharply above the rest, spoken with a familiarity that made her chest ache. "You wanted someone to listen," the voices murmured. "You wanted someone to stay. You asked for me." Tears stung her eyes as she stumbled forward, her hand brushing a section of wall slick with something warm and wet. She didn't look. She couldn't bear to look. Her pulse thundered in her ears as her vision began to blur, the hallway bending and warping like a funhouse corridor drawn by a madman. Ahead, a faint light flickered in the distance. A door, relief slammed into her chest so violently it made her knees buckle. She staggered toward it, her breaths ragged and uneven. The voices behind her rose in pitch, their whispers merging into a deafening chant. "Say it, say it, say it." Her fingers brushed the door frame just as the pounding started. 3 heavy, deliberate knocks that seemed to come from every surface at once. She flinched violently, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "You've come so far," the voice crooned. "Don't you want it to end?" She clenched her jaw, forcing her trembling hand onto the doorknob, but her body froze as a new sound filled the air, a soft sob. Her stomach twisted violently. It was his sob, her husband's. She could hear him on the other side of the door, crying softly, muttering her name in a broken whisper. Her throat tightened painfully as fresh tears burned her eyes. "Don't leave me," his voice cracked. "Please, don't leave me here." Her hand hovered on the doorknob, shaking violently. Then she felt it, a cold breath against her ear. "It's not him," the whisper came, low and amused. It never was. Her phone, dead for so long, flickered weakly in her hand, a single word blinking in red on the cracked screen. "Don't open it." Her chest ached with indecision, her trembling hand still on the knob. "You can't save him," the voice whispered, "but you can save yourself. All it takes is one word." The name, she could feel it forming at the back of her throat like bile. Unbidden, vile, wrong. She bit down hard on her lip until she tasted blood, shaking her head violently. "No," she whispered hoarsely. The voice sighed softly, almost disappointed. "Then you'll drown." Before she could react, the floor beneath her gave way entirely. She fell with a scream, darkness swallowing her whole. Cold, skeletal hands shot up from the void, gripping her ankles, wrists, hair, throat. They dragged her deeper into the abyss as the voices screamed their chorus into her skull. Her lungs burned as invisible water filled them, heavy and suffocating. She thrashed violently, but the hands held her fast, their nails digging deep into her skin. "Say us," they roared in unison. "Say us, or drown." To drown. Her vision blurred, her thoughts fragmented, as the name pressed harder against her mind. But through the suffocating noise, her phone flickered weakly in her hand,
the screen flashing one last desperate message. Scream your own name. She tried. No sound came. The shadows wrapped tighter around her chest, squeezing until she thought her ribs would snap. Her lips parted, and the creature's name clawed up her throat, but she bit it back with a choked sob. Summoning the last scrap of her strength, she screamed, not its name, but her own. The void recoiled violently, the hands releasing her all at once as she shot upward like a stone breaking the surface of water. Her lungs burned as she sucked in sweet, cold air. She landed hard on a solid floor, her body shaking violently. The voices were gone, the hands were gone. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was silence. She lay there, gasping and trembling, clutching her dead phone like a lifeline as tears streamed down her face.
She didn't know how long she lay there on the cold floor, her chest heaving as her lungs fought to remember how to breathe. Every inch of her body screamed with exhaustion, her muscles trembling violently, her skin slick with sweat and something else, thicker, stickier, a dark substance clinging to her fingertips. She dared not look at it, not yet. The air around her was dense, heavy as though she'd been submerged in black water and only now broken the surface. But the silence was worse. It wasn't peace. It wasn't escape. It was the waiting kind of silence. The kind that happens just before something reaches for you from the dark. Slowly, she sat up, her fingers clutching her dead phone, even though she knew it could no longer save her. The hallway was gone. The void was gone. She was somewhere else, entirely now, sitting in the center of a room she didn't recognize. The walls were cracked and bleeding, black veins spreading across the ceiling like roots reaching for her. Every breath echoed back at her, too loud, as if the room itself were listening. A sound broke the fragile quiet. A single soft knock. Her blood turned to ice. It came again, closer this time, though there were no doors here, no windows, no surfaces to knock on. 3 slow, deliberate raps that vibrated through the floor beneath her. Her stomach twisted violently. "Not again," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible. But deep down she knew this wasn't the same. This wasn't the thing announcing itself. This was the thing reminding her it was already inside. "You let me in," it whispered, the voice so soft it might have been in her head. "You don't even remember, do you? You invited me when you needed someone most. When you were lonely, when you whispered in the dark, hoping someone, anyone would hear." Her hands shot to her ears as she shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. "I didn't," she croaked. "I never," but the memory clawed at her now, fragments of nights spent in restless sleep, her lips murmuring questions to the shadows of the room. "Who are you? Are you there? What's your name?" The voice chuckled softly, so close now it felt as though it vibrated against her ribs. "You spoke to me first," it said, "and when I spoke back, you didn't shut me out. That's all it ever takes." The floor rippled beneath her like a living thing, and she scrambled backward until her spine pressed hard against the wall. She could feel its pulse through the cracked plaster, a slow and steady rhythm that matched her own racing heartbeat. "This isn't real," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This isn't," but the voice interrupted her with a low, guttural growl that made her bones ache. "This is more real than you've ever been." The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, stretching upward into towering shapes that twisted and writhed like smoke caught in a storm. Faces began to form within them, some familiar, others grotesque parodies of humanity, with too many eyes, too many mouths, all of them whispering her name in unison. She pressed her palms harder to her ears, sobbing now, her mind splintering under the sound. Her phone buzzed weakly in her grip, and she nearly dropped it in surprise. The cracked screen flickered to life, displaying words in faint, crimson letters. "Remember who you are." Her breath caught as she stared at the message, her tears blurring the screen. "What does that mean?" she whispered desperately. But there was no answer, just those same words, flashing again and again. She closed her eyes tight, forcing herself to think past the suffocating noise. Her name, she had screamed her own name before, and it had driven the thing back. But now, she couldn't even remember what her name was. The creature's voice had buried it, replaced it with the sound of its own. She pressed her nails into her palms until she felt blood. "I know who I am," she whispered shakily. "I know," but the words caught in her throat as the shadows surged forward, wrapping around her wrists like living chains. "Do you?" the voice hissed, its cold breath brushing her face. "Say it. Say my name, and I'll set you free. You've been carrying it inside you for so long. Let it out." Her lungs burned as she struggled against the shadowy restraints, her body trembling violently. The faces in the dark leaned closer, their two wide mouths opening in silent screams. She choked back a sob as the thing's name formed unbidden in her mind, clawing at her lips, desperate to escape. But her phone buzzed again, harder this time, its screen flashing a single word: fight. Summoning what little strength she had left, she shook her head violently. "No," she croaked, her voice raw. "You're not real. You're not." The creature's laughter cut her off, low and resonant. "If I'm not real, then why do you still hear me knocking?" Its grip tightened around her wrists, cold tendrils snaking up her arms toward her throat. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness pressing in as her strength waned. She felt it in her chest now, a hollow ache where her heart should be, as if the thing were already carving her out from the inside. Desperation surged in her veins as she forced her lips apart, but no sound came. Her name felt lost, buried beneath layers of whispers and lies. She gasped for breath as the creature's hold tightened, its laughter filling every corner of her mind. "Say it," it commanded, its voice now a deafening roar. "Say my name, and this ends." But even as the shadows threatened to crush her completely, a single thought broke through the terror, like a fragile shard of light. If saying its name ends it, maybe that's what it wants. Her pulse spiked violently as realization clawed its way into her fragmented mind. "You're trying to trick me," she whispered, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. "You're not offering freedom. You're offering the end of me." The laughter faltered for the first time, a sharp hiss of irritation replacing it. "Clever," it growled. "But clever doesn't save you here." With a scream that ripped her throat raw, she forced her own name past her lips. Not once, but over and over, louder each time. The shadows recoiled violently, the tendrils retreating as if burned. The faces screamed soundlessly as their forms dissolved into thick black smoke. The floor beneath her cracked, splitting open to reveal blinding light that seared her vision. The creature howled, its voice shaking the very air around her as its form unraveled like tattered cloth in a hurricane. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest as the ache there faded, replaced by a rush of warmth she hadn't felt in what felt like years. The air grew still, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't suffocating, it was empty, and for the first time she dared to believe she might be free. The silence felt wrong. Too still, too deliberate. She remained on her knees, her body trembling violently as her lungs heaved desperate, shallow breaths. The air carried no sound now, not even the faintest echo of her ragged gasps. It was as though the world itself had paused to watch her, waiting for what? Her hands pressed against the floor beneath her, and her stomach churned at the faint pulsing warmth that met her fingers. It wasn't wood, it wasn't stone, it was alive. The realization sent a cold spike of terror down her spine as she scrambled backward, her shoulders slamming against the wall. The floor shifted beneath her like muscle tensing beneath skin, and she felt it, the faint rhythm of a heartbeat, impossibly deep and slow. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't standing in a house. She was inside it. Inside him. The walls around her began to shift, slow undulations like the inhaling and exhaling of some great beast. She forced her legs to move, though every step felt heavier than the last, her feet sticking slightly to the warm, fleshy floor. Her chest ached with every breath, her ribs tight as though invisible hands still pressed against them. She clutched her dead phone out of habit, her thumb brushing its cold screen in a futile attempt to wake it. A soft sound rippled through the air, so quiet she almost didn't hear it. A laugh, slow, mocking, familiar. Her blood ran cold. "You can't fight what you're part of," the voice whispered. "You let me in. You're inside me now. But I'm inside you too." She staggered forward, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her head, trying to drown out the voice. But it was everywhere, above her, below her, inside her skull like a second heartbeat. Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath her, and she was thrown to her knees as the walls convulsed violently. A deafening knock reverberated through the space, 3 slow, deliberate raps that seemed to shake the very air. She pressed her hands over her ears, but it didn't matter. The sound came from inside her own head, rattling her teeth and bones. "Knock, knock," the voice crooned, its tone playful now. "Who's there?" Her throat felt tight, her mind screaming as she struggled to keep her lips sealed. "Say it," the voice demanded. Darker now. "You know my name. You've always known. Let me out. Let me wear your skin a while." Her knees buckled as another knock slammed through the space, louder than the first. The walls cracked and split open, revealing countless staring eyes, human eyes, animal eyes, eyes with no pupils, all focused on her, unblinking. Their gazes burned her skin, and she let out a choked sob as her body convulsed with terror. Then the faces appeared. They emerged from the walls, from the floor, even from the ceiling. Distorted replicas of every person she had ever loved, every friend, every stranger she'd passed in the street. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering her name with twisted affection. "You'll never leave," they chanted softly, "because there's nowhere to go. You were mine before the first knock." Her vision blurred as she stumbled forward, her hands outstretched blindly. But no matter how far she walked, the faces followed, stretching endlessly in all directions, their whispers digging deeper into her mind. "Say it," they urged. "Say the name, and the pain will stop." Her lips trembled as the name pressed harder against her throat, a bitter, metallic taste flooding her mouth. She clamped her jaw shut until her teeth ached, but she felt her resolve slipping. How long could she resist? Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her so violently she nearly dropped it. The screen flickered faintly, the letters fractured but still legible. "Don't give him your voice," she sobbed in relief,
clutching the phone to her chest as she forced her legs to keep moving. The faces screamed in fury now, their mouths gaping wide enough to split their heads in half. The whispers became howls, an unholy chorus that rattled the walls. "Say it," they shrieked. "Say it, now." The floor pitched violently beneath her feet, throwing her hard against the pulsating wall. She felt something coil around her ankle, a cold, wet hand dragging her back toward the cracked floor, where more hands now reached upward, clawing hungrily for her skin. Her nails tore into the wall as she fought to pull free, her screams echoing endlessly in the living chamber. But there was no door, no exit, only endless flesh and endless voices. The world twisted violently, the walls folding inward as if to crush her. Her vision dimmed at the edges, her thoughts fragmenting into flashes of memories. Her husband's laughter, the sound of rain against her bedroom window, the first faint knock that had felt almost harmless. "You invited me," the voice hissed. "This was always your choice." Her body began to sink into the pulsing floor, warm and slick, like a mouth ready to swallow. She screamed her own name, over and over, her throat raw, but it barely rose above the creature's laughter. "You can't fight forever," it crooned. "Sooner or later, every door opens." Her fingers scraped helplessly at the wall, her phone slipping from her grasp, as the shadows swallowed her waist, her chest, her shoulders. Her screams choked off as her mouth filled with thick, brackish liquid. Then came a sound she hadn't heard before, a faint chime, high and sweet, cutting through the cacophony like sunlight, piercing storm clouds. The hands recoiled violently as the walls shook with a deep, pained groan. She felt herself yanked upward, out of the suffocating floor and onto cold, solid ground. Her chest heaved as she coughed up, mouthfuls of black water, her trembling fingers clawing for her phone. The screen flickered weakly, a single word glowing in white. Remember, her name, her true name, not the one the creature had pressed into her thoughts, but the one she'd been born with, the one that tied her to the world above. She screamed it with everything left in her battered body, the sound ripping through the living space like a blade. The creature roared in fury as its walls cracked and crumbled, light spilling in through the fissures like fire through paper. She screamed again, louder, until her voice broke. The chamber exploded into blinding white. She was falling.
When her eyes opened, the first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the oppressive, waiting kind of silence from before, but a softer one, fragile, like the pause between breaths. She was lying in her own bed, or at least a perfect copy of it. The sheets were cool beneath her fingertips. The air smelled faintly of detergent, and the lavender candle she always kept on her nightstand. For a moment, she let herself believe it was over, that she'd survived, that the thing hadn't followed her back. She drew in a shaky breath, her chest still aching as though invisible hands were pressing there. Slowly she sat up, her head pounding with each movement. Her husband's side of the bed was empty. Of course it was. She pressed a hand to her mouth as fresh tears blurred her vision. Maybe he had never been there at all. Maybe she had only imagined his presence, clinging to some fragile hope that he was still reachable through the horror. Her phone lay on the nightstand, its screen cracked but glowing faintly. She picked it up with trembling fingers. One message, 4 words. "Don't answer the tide." The words sent a cold shiver through her veins. She stared at them until her vision swam. the letters burning into her mind like a brand. She set the phone down carefully, her fingers still trembling. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor cooled beneath her bare feet. Everything looked normal, too normal. The window showed a pale morning sky, sunlight streaming through sheer curtains that swayed slightly in a non-existent breeze. She tried to convince herself this was her bedroom, her real bedroom. But the lavender candle was unused. The small chip in the nightstand's corner was gone. She ran a hand along its smooth surface, her pulse spiking as she found no imperfection. Not real, not real. She whispered the words under her breath like a mantra, though it did little to slow the racing of her heart. A sound stopped her cold, a faint creak. It came from the hallway. She froze, her body tensing like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted toward the door, but it remained closed, its plain white surface unmarred. The creak came again, louder this time, the sound of weight shifting on floorboards. Her breath hitched as she clutched the edge of the mattress, her nails digging into the fabric. The phone buzzed suddenly, making her flinch violently. She grabbed it, her heart hammering in her chest. A new message flashed across the cracked screen. "He's come knocking. Don't listen." Her stomach twisted violently as a cold sweat broke out across her skin. "No," she whispered hoarsely, shaking her head. But deep down, she knew it was already too late. 3 slow, deliberate knocks reverberated through the house. The sound echoed deep in her bones, so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were shaking. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the knocks didn't stop. They vibrated through the floor, the bed frame, even her own body. "It's not real," she whispered desperately. "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." But the words faltered as a voice seeped into her mind, soft and familiar. "It's me," it said gently. "Please, let me in." Her chest constricted painfully as tears welled in her eyes. It was his voice, her husband's real voice, warm and full of the same quiet affection she remembered from countless nights together. "I don't know where I am," he whispered, "but I can hear you. You're so close. Please, open the door." Her hands trembled violently as they hovered in her lap. This was the moment she had dreaded and longed for in equal measure. Was it him? Could it really be him? The phone buzzed again, violently this time. "It's not him." The letters flashed red now, as though screaming at her. But the voice beyond the door sounded so real, so broken. "I can't hold on much longer," it whispered, choked with pain. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." A sob broke free from her throat as she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her mind screamed in conflict. The knocks came again, louder, more insistent. 3 perfect raps. Pause. 3 more. She could almost see the shape of a shadow beneath the door, feet shifting on the hallway floor, as if waiting. She squeezed her eyes shut, her body rocking back and forth. "It's not real," she whispered, hoarsely. "It's not him. It's not." But doubt gnawed at her, relentless and sharp. What if it was? A memory surfaced unbidden, the creature's words. "I could wear him like a glove." Her stomach turned violently as bile rose in her throat. She stumbled to her feet, her legs trembling violently, every muscle screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere but that door. "Please," the voice whispered again. "I'm so cold out here. Please, don't leave me." Her hand hovered inches from the doorknob, her fingers twitching. She could almost feel warmth radiating from the other side.
a presence so familiar it ached in her bones. "Don't open it," she whispered to herself, her nails digging crescents into her palm. But her body didn't listen. Some part of her, deep, primal, desperate, wanted nothing more than to turn the handle.
Her hand hovered over the doorknob, as if drawn by an invisible thread, her trembling fingers twitching closer with each heartbeat. The knocks had stopped, replaced by an unbearable silence so deep it pressed against her eardrums like water. Her own breathing sounded foreign to her, too loud, too desperate in the stillness. "I can feel you on the other side," the voice whispered again, warm and trembling with vulnerability. "I'm here. I'm real. I'm me." Her throat constricted painfully as fresh tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her husband, her real husband, was just a door away, lost and scared and waiting for her to save him. "Don't leave me out here," he said softly. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." The words twisted in her chest like a blade, sharp with longing and guilt. She remembered his laughter, the quiet nights spent wrapped in his arms, the warmth of his presence beside her in bed. Could she really leave him out there, if there was even the slightest chance he was real? But deep down, something cold and primal whispered in her gut, "It's not him." She staggered back a step, clutching her chest as her breath came in ragged gasps. "No," she whispered hoarsely, "you're not real. You're not him." But even as the words left her mouth, doubt coiled in her mind like a living thing. The creature's voice, when it had worn his skin before, hadn't sounded like this. This voice was softer, more fragile, laced with the same quiet affection she remembered from nights spent talking in the dark. "You're tired," it said gently. "You've been so strong for so long. Just open the door, and we'll go home." Together, her stomach churned violently as the floor beneath her feet rippled like disturbed water. The room seemed to tilt subtly, gravity pulling her toward the door, as though it had become the center of the universe. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand, startling her so badly she nearly dropped it. The cracked screen flashed a single word in bold crimson letters, "Trick." She stared at it, her hands trembling violently. "No," she whispered again, louder this time, as if saying it could anchor her. But the voice pressed on, more insistent now, the cracks in its facade so subtle they were almost imperceptible. "You promised you wouldn't let me go," it said, its tone cracking faintly as though holding back tears. "You said we'd find each other no matter what. Was that a lie?" Her nails dug into her palms until she felt warm blood slick her skin. "It's lying," she told herself. "It's lying. It's always been lying." But her chest ached, as if her ribs were about to splinter, her body locked in place, unable to move away from the door, no matter how desperately she wanted to. Then came a sound that froze her blood, a faint shuffle, like bare feet on wood. It came from behind her. Slowly, her head turned, the air thick with static electricity, as the weight of an unseen presence pressed against her back. She couldn't see it, but she felt it. Tall, wrong, standing just out of her peripheral vision. Her breath hitched as cold air brushed her neck, and a second voice, low and guttural, growled directly in her ear. "He's dead." She flinched violently, tears streaming freely now as her body trembled uncontrollably. "You know it," the second voice hissed. "I know it. But you keep pretending. You want me to wear his skin. You want me to make it real." Her stomach lurched violently as bile rose in her throat. She clenched her jaw, her voice hoarse, as she whispered,
No, I don't. The guttural voice laughed low and sharp, its hot breath making her skin crawl. You're lying, it crooned. You invited me, you asked for someone, anyone, and now I'm all you have. Her phone buzzed again, the screen flashing violently. Remember who died? She squeezed her eyes shut, the weight of memory crashing over her like a tidal wave. The accident, the late night call, the sterile hospital room, and the white sheet pulled over a familiar face. He had been gone long before the knocking ever started. She sobbed as the realization cut through her like glass. You're not him, she choked out, her voice cracking. You've never been him. The door rattled violently, 3 deafening knocks exploding through the room like gunshots. The walls shuddered, the ceiling cracked, and the floor heaved as though something massive was pressing against the other side. Say it, the guttural voice roared in her ear, its tone no longer soft, no longer tender. Let me out, let me live. Shadows poured from beneath the door, thick tendrils writhing toward her bare feet. She staggered backward, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The screen flashed a final desperate message. Scream your name. Her lips parted, her voice catching in her throat as the shadows surged forward, curling hungrily around her ankles. The guttural voice shrieked in fury as she summoned every ounce of strength left in her battered body. She screamed, not the creature's name, not her husband's, but her own, again and again, louder with each breath, until her throat felt raw and bleeding. The shadows recoiled violently, shrieking in agony as the tendrils withered into ash. The door cracked down the center, blinding white light spilling through as the room began to crumble around her. She stumbled back, shielding her eyes as the guttural voice screamed one last time, "You can't exist without me." But she didn't stop screaming her name.
Her throat burned raw as she screamed her own name, the sound ripping through the fragile fabric of the space around her. The room convulsed violently, the walls splitting apart like brittle eggshells, light searing through the cracks in blinding shafts. The shadows screamed in unison, their wails 1,000 overlapping voices, some hers, some familiar, some grotesque imitations of humanity. The guttural voice roared above them all, shaking the floor beneath her feet as it shrieked in rage. "You think you're real," it bellowed. "You think that name makes you whole?" The door before her splintered violently, shards of it suspended mid-air as though time itself had fractured. Beyond the door, there was no hallway, only endless void, shifting and pulsing with a darkness so complete it seemed to drink the light around it. And yet, faintly, she thought she could see shapes moving out there, shapes that shouldn't exist. Faces without features, limbs bent at impossible angles, all pressing against the threshold, desperate to pour through. The air thickened, clinging to her skin like oil, as tendrils of shadow surged toward her feet once more. She stumbled back, her breath coming in shallow, frantic gasps, clutching her chest as pain radiated outward like cracks in glass. "You don't even remember, do you?" The guttural voice hissed, coiling around her mind like a noose. "How many times have you opened the door? How many times have you let me in?" The words slammed into her skull, carrying flashes of memories she didn't want. Nights standing before doors she didn't recognize, her trembling hand reaching for countless doorknobs, the same voice whispering behind each one. She fell to her knees, clutching her head as sobs racked her body. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." But the memories kept coming, each one sharper, clearer, until she could no longer deny it. She had opened the door before, again and again, each time believing it would be the last, each time losing a piece of herself she couldn't recover. Her phone buzzed weakly in her pocket, a faint, pitiful vibration. She fumbled for it with shaking fingers, the cracked screen barely glowing now. A single message appeared in faint, fading letters. "It's still your name." Her vision blurred as fresh tears stung her eyes. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe she was still herself, that there was something left of her to save. But the creature's laughter wrapped around her like chains, cold and unyielding. "There is no you," it thundered. "You are a doorway, nothing more." The walls around her exploded outward, pieces of them floating weightlessly into the void beyond. The bed frame twisted and splintered, its pieces dragged upward into the swirling blackness. The floor cracked beneath her hands, glowing with veins of searing white light that burned her skin on contact. She screamed again, forcing her voice past the tightening grip of the shadows around her throat. "I'm still here," the guttural voice howled in fury, the void beyond the door surging forward in a tidal wave of darkness. Hands, thousands of them, burst from the edges of reality, grasping at her limbs, her hair, her clothes. She struggled violently, her nails digging into the slick floor as she tried to anchor herself in place. But the hands were too many, their grip impossibly strong. "Let go of me," she shrieked, her voice cracking. But they didn't. They pulled harder, dragging her toward the threshold where the void waited hungrily. The creature's laughter roared louder than ever, deafening and triumphant. "I don't need your permission anymore," it snarled. "You're already mine." Her vision dimmed at the edges, darkness seeping into her thoughts as her hands slipped helplessly against the smooth, glowing floor. The pressure in her chest grew unbearable, her lungs straining for air that wouldn't come. And then faintly, a whisper cut through the cacophony. "Say it one more time." Her eyes widened as she recognized the voice, her own voice, but not broken. Not afraid, strong, fierce. The sound echoed in her mind like a rallying cry. "Your name," it urged. "Say it like you believe it." She felt the faintest flicker of warmth in her chest, fragile but real. Her lips parted as the hands dragged her closer to the threshold. The void reached for her face, now tendrils curling hungrily around her jaw. "Say it," her voice commanded from within, louder now. She took in a ragged breath, her body shaking violently as she screamed her name, louder, stronger, with every ounce of life she had left. The sound exploded from her like a shock wave, a blast of raw primal defiance that tore through the void like lightning. The hands recoiled violently, their fingers snapping like brittle twigs. The shadows screamed in agony, their forms withering and dissolving into ash. The guttural voice shrieked one final time, a sound of pure hatred and fear, before being ripped apart by the force of her voice. The void faltered, retreating in on itself as the pieces of the room rushed back together. The door slammed shut with a thunderous boom that echoed endlessly, and then silence. The silence was deafening. She lay sprawled on the cold floor, her body trembling violently as each shallow breath rasped in her raw throat. The room had stilled, the walls once more solid, unbroken by cracks or shadows. The door stood where it had always been, plain, white, harmless. She stared at it through tear-blurred eyes, her chest aching with each heaving gasp. Was it over? Had she won? The thought felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass stretched too far. She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the mattress to steady herself. For the first time in what felt like centuries, she heard nothing. No knocks, no whispers, no guttural laughter seeping into her mind. Just her heartbeat, steady and unbroken, anchoring her to the moment. She curled her hands into fists, the sensation grounding her as sobs shook her shoulders. "I'm still here," she whispered, hoarsely. The words sounded foreign, like they belonged to someone else, but they were hers. They had to be. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before she found the strength to move. She pushed herself upright, her muscles protesting violently as she staggered to her feet. The room looked the same as it always had, the bed slightly unmade, the curtains swaying gently in the morning breeze, her phone lying silent on the nightstand. But it felt different, hollow, as if something essential had been ripped out of it. Her eyes drifted to the door again, unease curling in her stomach. She wanted to believe it was just a door now, just wood and paint. But deep down she knew better. That door had never been just a door. Her phone buzzed faintly, startling her from her thoughts. She snatched it up with trembling fingers, the cracked screen flickering weakly. A single new message appeared in pale grey text. "Don't forget, it knocks twice." Her blood ran cold as the words seared themselves into her mind. The phrase repeated endlessly in her thoughts, each repetition heavier than the last. Slowly, almost against her will, her eyes drifted back to the door. Her breath caught as she saw it, so faint it could have been a trick of the light. A handprint, dark smudged across the white paint, as though something had pressed its palm there and dragged it downward. Her stomach twisted violently as she stumbled back, clutching her chest. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She had closed it. She had screamed her name. It should be over, but the handprint remained, stark against the white surface, and deep in the stillness, she thought she heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound. Tap. Pause. Tap. She pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently as her breath came in ragged sobs. "It's not real," she whispered. "It's not real anymore." But the sound persisted, low and deliberate. Tap. Tap. Louder this time. Closer. Her phone buzzed again in her hand, the screen flashing a single desperate warning. "He's waiting." She dropped the device, as though it had burned her, the phone clattering to the floor and skidding beneath the bed. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she backed away, her legs trembling violently. The door handle rattled faintly, a subtle twitch, as though someone or something was testing it from the other side. And then the knock came, 3 slow, deliberate raps that vibrated through the floor and walls. She screamed, her voice raw and broken, as she stumbled back against the dresser. The sound echoed endlessly, filling every corner of the room, until it felt like the walls were breathing again. She clamped her hands over her mouth, her body sliding down to the floor, as hot tears blurred her vision. The knock came again, 3 raps, heavier this time. The door handle turned slowly, stopping just short of opening. She shook her head violently, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over, as if the words alone could keep the door shut. But deep in her chest, a horrifying realization settled like lead. She wasn't sure how much longer she could resist. The air thickened, charged with static that raised the fine hairs on her arms. From the other side of the door came a voice, soft, sweet, almost pleading. "Please, it's so cold out here. Let me in." Her heart ached violently, her body trembling as the sound of his voice wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. But she knew better now. She knew what waited beyond that door.
Still, the longing pressed against her like a physical weight, to hear him, to hold him, to pretend, just for a little while longer, that she wasn't alone. "Say my name," the voice urged gently. "Say it, and I'll come back." Her hands pressed hard against her ears, her nails digging into her scalp as she sobbed. "No," she whispered, "not this time, not ever again." But the knocking didn't stop.
And so, the knocking never truly stopped. Some say if you press your ear to an old wooden door late at night, you'll hear it. 3 slow knocks, a pause, and 3 more. Maybe it's just the house settling, or maybe it's something else waiting for you to answer. But if you ever hear a voice whisper your name from the other side, don't speak, don't move. Whatever you do, don't open the door. If you enjoyed this chilling story and want more terrifying tales, subscribe now and join us for even deeper journeys into the dark side of history, legends, and the unknown. You won't want to miss what's coming next.